Hello out there, my name is Milesy and welcome to my channel. Today we have got a 48 pack of Hohuhu markers, not Ohuhu. There is an H in the front there. So I guess that means that Hohuhu are doing well if we're getting a knockoff brand here. Again, I really like, I think I've said these before, I really like the hard cases that they come in. They do take up a little bit of room, but the pens don't go everywhere. Let's take a look at what we have. It's a pretty decent swatch selection, it looks like. Just going off of their swatches, their warm grays are very brown. We've got a green gray, we've got some cool grays as well. And a couple of colors I haven't seen before, although I do notice it uses the same number system. Let me focus that so you can see it. It does use... oh, autofocus and stuff. So it does use the same number system. I've never seen putty, I don't think. Salmon pink looks new. I think most of them have had wine red, which is never red. So let's go ahead and pop it off. We've got these really nice triangular shapes in here, and they're not really in any particular order. Being triangles in a box like this, I think means they're never going to really behave properly. So let's pull one out and look at it. And we've got these really nice textured lids. I really like that. It makes them a lot easier to hold and grip onto. And they do fit on the ends. So there is our bullet tip. And on the other end, here is our chisel nib. Fairly standard. This one does not have its branding anywhere. It just says art marker. And again, we don't get the color anywhere on the barrel either. So let's go ahead and do the swatches. These do feel very light and almost flimsy in my hand. The lids do seem to lock into place though very nicely. I'm covered in marker. Ugh. And they don't really want to come off very easily either, so that texture on the lid is really nice. It makes it a little bit easier to hold on to when you're wrestling with your stuff. Get on there. Oh, that one doesn't really match the lid at all. It's called Light Violet, and that is... I would call that more of a violet than a purple. I will say that. Whether I'd call it a light violet, I'm not sure, but that is what I would call more of a violet. It does also use the same numbering system as a lot of these other markers, and one thing I am really, really curious about. One of these days, I think I want to go through my entire marker collection and see how well everything matches up. Like, I wonder if all of my 47s would look the same. I don't think they do. I really don't think they do. Also, I am filming today's videos on a different microphone setting, so I'm not sure how I actually sound. I guess I will take a look at them when I'm done filming and see. That one is Azalea Purple. I don't know if I've come across that one yet either. And that is another thing I've noticed. They do, a lot of these cheaper markers are using the same numbering system, but they do all have very different markers in them. They're not all going to be the same. So that is this one's lemon yellow, which is really dark. A lot of times the lemon yellow is really pale. That one, by the way, is the lemon yellow. So this one's pastel yellow. Would I call that pastel? I don't think I would. So this set, the names on the cap really don't feel very accurate. So this one is a very interesting spread. It does have some more brighter, vibrant tones than some of the other packs we've looked at recently. And let's take a look. And it does seem like, I know it's always really hard for you guys to see this, it does seem like that there's a really nice variation of values on here. So we've got some really bright ones, and we've got some really dark ones, and there's some nice mid-tones. Let's do one last thing. And I feel like they're going to be very similar to some of the other ones, where they will blend. We might just need to... I just need to work it a little bit, but they do get there eventually. So this is an interesting one. There's some really bright colors on here. So I'm not quite sure what we'll make with this, but I guess it's time to figure it out. So I wanted to do something a little bit more simple because, again, I was really trying to get as much stuff done as I could this weekend. And I kind of landed on this funky little foxy creature. And one of the things that I really want to work on with these, especially going forward, is I want to try to get some more detail into these. But this week I just really did not have the time, I did not have the energy, I barely have the time to be recording these as it is. So it wound up just being this really simple little foxy thing. And at first I thought I wanted it to be like inside of a diamond, but I didn't have a really good way to do straight edges, and I don't like for these kind of elements to be done without a ruler. Sometimes when I'm doing like background elements, it looks a lot better to not use a ruler than it does to use a ruler, but for frames and borders, I generally want my lines to be really straight and to have the right angles, so I wound up putting a circle on there instead. And I think one thing that this particular drawing really highlights is my inability to copy things. I can't do symmetry very well. My microphone's falling. I can't do symmetry very well. I can't copy things and make things look the same thing twice very well. This is something that I think, had I done digitally, I absolutely would have cloned most of the aspects. I would have, for instance, cloned his ears and maybe his eyes, and then free-handed everything else so it wasn't completely symmetrical. But I tried very hard to get his eyes to at least look right, and I think his ears kind of came out okay. They're a little bit lopsided, but I've always been really bad at that. That's why I don't have a very easy time thumbnailing something and then drawing it again on a bigger piece of paper. That's not particularly easy for me as well, so I did finally get some decent sketch paper. This was actually, though, on some printer paper because I only got the sketch paper today. So I will be having an easier time putting bigger drawings into my sketchbook because I won't have to be using that really big, chunky, spiral-bound one that I've been using. And I kind of thought at first I might want to try to do the same thing that I did on the last one and do the values first, but I also thought that maybe if this one turned out really decent, I could turn it into a print. And I think I still might. I'm going to need to do a little bit of editing on it, though, because I screwed up with one of the grays and just was not in the mood to fix it. But I thought, you know, I might as well do this in a way that I'm comfortable with doing it. So I laid down the marker first, and then I did the inking because I wanted to use my Copic multi-liners, which I've always had a problem with the Copic multi-liners smudging. So one thing you will notice also is that the cap is over there in the corner of the book, but this is not actually one of the Hohuhu markers because that set does not have a very good selection of grays. There is another set that I got that has 100 markers, and I think that one has some better grays, but I actually had to use my Artex set, which is just all grays. It's something like 40-something shades of gray. I think I showed it in one of the haul videos. I don't know if that video has gone up yet. But I had to use that one because there was just no good grays. All of the grays that are in the Hohuhu set are really dark. And I should have kept using the Artex markers to do the shading, but that's kind of why the shading got a little bit messed up, because I decided I'm doing a video on the Hohuhu markers. Hohuhu markers, that is a mouthful. So I wanted to use them as much as possible without having to lean on the Artex ones. And it just wound up being the case where, because there's like 3 shades of gray, the markers were either too light or too dark. And I wound up using a shade that was ultimately too light, and it did not shade on some of the darker pieces, and you'll see that in a little bit. Another thing I noticed about these is they are a little bit more dry than what I am used to. So they don't quite bleed out as bad as some of the other brands do. They do still bleed a little bit, but this is really cheap sketchbook paper. Everything bleeds on this paper. But it also means that they have just a little bit more streakiness to them. I had to be very careful to not have a bunch of lines showing through, especially on the orange, because there was this huge patch of orange in here, and I tried really hard to break up what I knew was going to be big patches of color as much as possible, and it was pretty hard to get there. I think the orange wound up still being kind of streaky, and I managed to fix most of it, but it could have been a little bit better. And the brown, even though the sections for the brown weren't that big, they were still kind of streaky. So these markers, I think, are definitely meant to be used a little bit differently than how I was using them. And if you look at the white bits above the eyes, they did have a lot of the orange wind up bleeding into them. And I even laid down the white first to try to make sure that the bleeding didn't wind up being as bad, but it still bled into the white really badly, which was kind of annoying, but I think I mostly managed to fix it later on when I was doing the line art later. But these markers are very different from any of the other ones that I've used, and they're part of why I know that even though a lot of them are using the same colors, they're not necessarily the same markers, because I'll get some that are really juicy or some that have just leaked all over the place. You'll see a few videos with that. And then I'll get markers like these that are not dry, but they're really not wet either. And it's really interesting. I actually plan on doing a video on that later at some point and seeing what it is that makes these markers different. Basically, I was talking about that a little bit at the beginning, wanting to see, for instance, if every single marker with a 47 was the same. Now, I wish I had cell shaded this piece instead of trying to do this more loosey-goosey shading. I wish I'd taken more care with it and put the time into mapping out my shadows, because they wound up really inconsistent. I think the line art at the end did help, but this would have looked better, one, if I had used my Artex markers so that I had a better range of gray,
And two, I think doing it this way would have looked better if I had, I think, layered the gray like I did with Mr. Wolf back there. And then this was tough because I couldn't put my multi-liner into my compass. The compass doesn't really work that way. It just holds a really big chunk of graphite. It won't hold a pen. So I had to freehand the circle and hope that I got it right. And then later I had to freehand it again with the multi-liner. But these always kind of really confound me. I would love to be able to get some gradients in these, but I know it's never ever going to happen in the sketchbook, because I tried it once on the very first page and it did not like it. The page started to fall apart. So I have all of this really nice paper. I can use that and really get experimenting, but right now with the sketchbook I'm just trying things, seeing how I like them, and trying to improve. I am unfortunately limited by the fact that it is sketchbook paper, and you can see that I've got this plastic sheet underneath the pages to keep it from bleeding out. So the last couple of videos I've been using these brush pens, and I don't like them, but I do have a couple of really big sets of multi-liners, and unfortunately I seem to be missing a few. Because I know that this Copic set is supposed to be a set of 10, but for some reason I can only find 6 of them. And I've got a bunch of duplicates, so I need to figure out where the rest of my Copics have gone. But I kind of wanted to go for this style of line art that was fairly popular when I was a kid. I don't see it done too much anymore. I think it kind of has its roots in manga, where different areas of the picture have different line weights. So the outer lines will have these really intense weights, and then inside lines will get gradually smaller and smaller. So I kind of tried to go for that. I remember that's a style that I used a lot. And I did notice that having done the coloring first somehow made it a lot easier for me to put the pen down. It's almost like having these barriers of color helps my brain see exactly where I needed it to go, whereas if I'm just trying to trace over the graphite, I never have a very good time. So apparently, doing it last, as awkward as it looks when I'm coloring, it does seem to really help, and I think this is something I can get very comfortable with. I just need to find the rest of them, because I would like some of those missing sizes, and I would like to be able to just get a little bit more comfortable with them in general. And I don't know if they smudge because I never let them dry all the way, or if they smudge just because Copic multi-liners are smudgy. I have some microns as well, but again, I think I'm missing a few of those too, because I didn't have any of the sizes I wanted there. But I think the whole thing, even with the really bad shading, I think all I need to do is just go through and edit up some of the shading, go over it a little bit more with a darker color, and that should really bring everything back and make this print-worthy, I think. I think this could be a really cute print if I put a little bit more time into it. Probably not this week. I've got a lot of stuff I need to do today. I've got a lot of stuff I need to do this week, because it's a disaster here. Let's not even try to pretend that it isn't. But again, though, as I put in the lines, the shading started to make a lot more sense. I just think, though, that this one would have benefited from having more planned shading, but I also feel like I can probably really start to get used with having this looser shading that's just a little bit more scribbled out and less planned and mapped out. I think they both work really well for different pieces. But I just really liked this character. I liked how he turned out. He's kind of mysterious and a little bit funky. And getting the whole thing done, just, I don't know, I really liked it. not really a whole lot I can complain about. I just wish the markers had behaved a little bit better. I wish the markers had better gray. So that is something to really keep an eye out for, especially if you're someone who likes to shade with the grays, or if you want to just use different grays. A lot of these won't have the best selection, but I will also put a link down to the Artex one as well. So there will be affiliate links for both the Hohuhu and the Artex markers down below so that you can check them both out. I've liked them both. The Hohuhu ones were a little bit too dry, I think, but they weren't terrible. But I liked how this guy turned out. I think I'm just going to fuss with him a little bit more just to make him stand out better. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, all that fun stuff. And I will see you next time. Bye!